what's your podcasting schedule? You have to be consistent and commit to that if you're looking for a growth goal, in my opinion. I think that that's the most important part of growing your show, is showing up for your listeners and being consistent.
I want 3,000 downloads by December 31st. I assume today. I'm assuming December 31st, 2022.
This year.
But hey, who knows? So yes, here we go.
We're going to go with this year. And
Okay.
Candace, I'm thinking that you are just rocking it with your publicist business so much that maybe that has taken over your podcast production, because I checked out your podcasts. I saw an episode April 2020, an episode April 2021, 2 episodes September, and 2 episodes October of this year. So my question for you, especially when it comes to a download goal or growing your listenership, is what's your podcasting schedule? You have to be consistent and commit to that if you're looking for a growth goal, in my opinion. I think that that's the most important part of growing your show, is showing up for your listeners and being consistent.
Yeah.
Do you agree, Elsie?
I do agree. And again, consistency doesn't necessarily mean more, right? It means consistency. It means setting expectations. And you have some suggestions. I might have some suggestions as well. But yes, consistently looks different for a lot of people, but it still needs, you have to make a choice. It has to mean something.
Yeah, and communicate that to your audience too.
Absolutely.
If you have 2 episodes in September and 2 in October, maybe that's how you're rolling with it. And if so, just make sure your audience knows that.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so that's step number 1, is you got to get a consistency down and a podcast schedule in place that you're going to commit to, so that your listeners know when you're showing up. Step number 2, Elsie, you had mentioned this as well. We couldn't find your podcast on your website.
I know.
So
I was like,
that's yeah, that's such a huge opportunity, right? Because again, I'm guessing that you're just crushing it in your publicist business. You probably have a lot of traffic on your website, a lot of people who are interested in hiring you. Those are all your ideal listeners. So if they're going to your website and they can't find your podcast, then you're missing out on a lot of, organic growth right there.
yeah, for sure. And that's a basic, sometimes for us, it's a lot of the basic things that we miss out on, but making sure that somebody can quickly find your show, what it's about on your website, or whatever your website, actually, you know what? Not even on your website. What if you only have it on your, a link in social media or something, but I need to be able to find it real quick. And that was the issue that I found too, when I was trying to figure out what the podcast was. It took me a little too long for me to find it. And I was looking, you know what I mean? It's like, if you're not looking, you would just skip over it. Yeah.
Yes, I totally agree. I had the same experience because I went to the Twitter profile and I didn't see any mention of the podcast on there either, but it looked like she is active on Twitter. So I would love to see, and in your description on Twitter, she mentioned that she was all these things. Put podcaster in there and have a link to your podcast. I did see mention of the podcast on Instagram. But then it was like a click from my Instagram to go to my podcast Instagram. And then on your podcast Instagram, I saw a subscribe page. And then on the subscribe page, the call to action was to subscribe to email. I would love to see the subscribe page, number 1, be on your main website. And number 2, have links to all the places that people can listen to your podcast: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, etc. Because if you want people to listen to your show, you got to make it easy for them. Otherwise, like Elsie said, if people have to look too hard, they're just going to stop.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then I would create that consistent schedule, batch create so that you're 1 month ahead always. I love being 1 month ahead. It's just so much peace of mind. Create rotating calls to action to increase listener engagement and to get your listeners to start sharing the show with their friends. There's some crazy stat about how people find out about podcasts, and a vast majority of it is through friends. So encouraging your listeners to share. Promote every episode and ask your guests to promote as well. And then, and sorry, these are all steps. We're up to step number 8. I would reach out to at least 10 other podcasts who speak to a similar audience as you and get booked as a guest on their podcast. That's my favorite growth strategy right there, is being a guest on other people's podcasts.
Yeah, these are good. And these are all very repeatable, because even if, like, let's say consistency is the key as step number 1, think about it from the perspective of, okay, you done all the 8 steps that Kate just mentioned, and you go back to the consistency. And that's when you look at it and go, am I being consistent? Can I be consistent in a different way? Do I have to go weekly? Do I have to go fortnightly? Do I have to go monthly? And you make an adjustment based on whatever that is. Then if you go, looking at your podcast website, let's see, how much better can you make it? How much more optimized can you make it? You're not going to get it perfect the first time. I can tell you that,
Yeah.
And things change all the time, meaning behavior from people consuming your content is going to be changing. New buttons that Apple Podcast is going to say, now you can use this kind of thing to support your show. Like, all of that stuff continues to change and shift, and education also moves back and forth. So being able to repeat these steps to see if you're getting to those goals is one of the biggest things for you to pay attention to.